America, America, make God thy gold refined, till all success be nobleness, and ever again divine. And you know, when I was in school, we used to sing it something like this. Listen here. Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wayland Weekly Buzz. I'm your host, Ken Isaacson. This week, we continue reviewing key articles being presented at April 29th town meeting. We focus on the 6 projects, actually I believe there's 5 now, being proposed for funding at an annual town meeting by the Community Preservation Committee, CPC. Our guests are Gretchen Schuler, chair of the committee, and member Susan Green. But first, these town government committee reports and other news items. At their April 16th meeting, the selectmen held a workshop at the Wayland Public Library. The main thrust of the meeting was a discussion among several town boards and organizations regarding their town manager's special act. That town legislation being proposed by the selectmen would have the town approve changing the title and role of the town administrator to town manager. That change would elevate the position now held by Louise Miller since the fall of 2018. Many jurisdictional, administrative, and functional changes are of concern to several of the town boards, who have voiced those concerns over the past several months. Mainly they revolve around express conflicts of established legislative jurisdictions. Among those town bodies voicing concerns and taking part in the workshop were the Finance Committee, the Board of Library Trustees, the Personnel Board, the Board of Assessors, and the Board of Public Works. We'll continue to report on this subject as it moves forward during towards a town meeting vote, possibly at the next special town meeting. And a complete rundown of the draft act and comment letters from the above named bodies are available on our website if you're interested in reading them. waycam.tv/buzz. Several months ago, we reported the start of discussions to examine whether there was a benefit to combining some of the Wastewater Commission duties into the Board of Public Works. To date, no major changes have taken place, but the DPW is now in charge of day-to-day activities related to both the wastewater management district in the center of town and also the Wayland High School wastewater treatment facility. The WWMDC remains responsible for management of the wastewater management district. This includes all user-related functions, Board of Health functions, updating rules and regulations, and personnel decisions. We are told that the future of the WWMDC will be addressed at the direction of the town administrator not earlier than the summer of 2019. Options include keeping the WWMDC with 3 commissioners, absorbing the responsibility for wastewater into the Board of Public Works, or making a new entity to govern water and wastewater. Anything significant would have to be voted at a future town meeting. The April 11th meeting of the Conservation Commission included a discussion of the Oxbow Meadows Field, which was permitted by the Commission in February of 2018. A required final planting plan was apparently not approved by the Commission. There were questions about the condition and location of many of the trees planted last November, as well as the location of the replacement ADA walking trail. A site visit will be done. The first hearings on the new application for the Loker Field were held on April 11th. Town Administrator Louise Miller, as applicant for the project, explained the tie vote denials of the previous applications. She will have Town Council provide written answers to the Commission. to their legal questions to clarify the decision-making process going forward. The Commission imported the documents from the previous applications into the current file. Some incorrect and missing information on the plans was noted and will be revised before the next hearings on April 25th. The permit and management plan drafted in March will be the basis of any permit issued under Chapter 194. The existence of a potential vernal pool at North Pond near the proposed parking lot was evaluated by experts on behalf of the Commission. An additional survey of the pond will be done in the next 1 to 2 weeks to confirm the findings. They will also investigate the removal of trees in the upland area as it may affect the vernal pool. And next week we'll be talking about that vernal pool at our interview. The Recreation Commission met on April 9th. They announced that they have decided on the low bidder for the Loker Field project. The bidder will be asked to extend their deadline to accommodate upcoming Conservation Commission and Zoning Board meetings on April 25th and May 21st, respectively. They will award the contract as soon as they receive approval from those two boards, assuming the project passes at town elections on April 23rd and at annual town meeting on April 29th. In other news, the Commission reported that the Dudley Woods Walking Trail is well underway and they expect completion by June 30th. They expect completion of the Oxbow Meadows Field by June 30th as well, and that it will be ready for play by August, possibly sooner. At their April 10th meeting, the Environmental and Climate Committee reported that they are working on closing out the current Green Communities grant by early summer. They've received state approval to adjust budgets and are working on the final projects to fund. These will include support for streetlight conversion to LEDs, and if funds permit, the likely purchase of added hybrid vehicles to supplement the current electric and one electric hybrid car. Excuse me. The committee announced the official formation of the nonprofit Mass Energize. That organization was formed by residents of Wayland and Concord. Their goal is to help residents and businesses take action on climate change by providing resources, information, and tools to help us all take action. In Wayland, the goal is that 50% of all households take at least one action on climate change. So far, over 470 households have acted, but they expect that many more have likely taken steps but not yet logged on those actions on the Energize Wayland website. Residents are encouraged to go to energizewayland.com and to participate in reaching Wayland's goals. Another project underway is Pearl certification, a new national green high-performance home certification program for existing homes and contractors installing home performance materials and equipment, such as HVAC and insulation. For a limited time, Mass Energize is able to offer free home certifications, so you can learn more about these initiatives at energizewayland.org. And the committee informs us that their community cleanup last weekend was a great success and thanks all residents who participated. And those are our reports for this week. Now here's our interview.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Wayland Weekly Buzz. I'm your host Susan Wagner. This week we continue reviewing key articles being presented at April 29th's annual town meeting. We focus on the 5 projects being proposed for funding at annual town meeting by the Community Preservation Committee, CPC. Our guests are Gretchen Schuler, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, and member Susan Green. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So your committee is in charge of spending funds, that's always fun, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Spending funds collected from our real estate taxes under the Community Preservation Act. And some of our viewers may not be familiar with the Community Preservation Act, so could you give us a brief history of the Act in general, for example, how it came about in Massachusetts, and specifically in Wayland? For example, how was it adopted and when?
Alrighty, I'll start with that,
Okay.
Since I was on the first committee from 2001 as a planning board member. At any rate, it was signed into law in December, something like December 27th, 2000.
2000.
And then our community adopted it at our town meeting in April of 2001. So 4 months later. But it required a ballot question first. Will you accept the Community Preservation Act in your community? And you had to determine the percentage point at that point. And so it's written, the law is written up to 3%. Most communities, most surrounding communities have 3%. We chose 1.5%. And so that's what ours was. And then we went to town meeting and we adopted a bylaw that describes the committee.
Right. So in Wayland, I know it's different in each town, as you've just said. So is it implemented when a house is bought or sold or through property taxes?
No, it is implemented for everyone across the board, and it is a 1.5% of your tax bill.
Of your property
tax. So if your tax bill is, your property tax bill, yes. If your tax bill is $10,000, an additional $150 is added, and that goes into the Community Preservation Fund. So it's everyone. Then the part that people get confused and think about the real estate transactions is related to the state trust fund, which is part of the Community Preservation Act. So that when your deed is filed at the registry, there is a fee that goes into the state trust fund, and that is monitored and determined by the state. How that
So that's different.
Distributed.
That's different from the property tax thing.
That is.
Okay. All right. So could you speak briefly also about the Community Preservation Act in other towns? I mean, what percentage, for example, of all of our towns in Massachusetts has adopted a community preservation mechanism?
Well, as you had pointed out to us before, it is 170, around 170 cities and towns, about half, almost half.
Almost half.
Of the 353 cities and towns in Massachusetts. And in terms of our surrounding towns, which I think is interesting for us, because we look at those, all of our surrounding towns except for Natick and Framingham.
Okay.
But certainly Sudbury, Lincoln, Concord, Carlisle, Weston, Waltham, Watertown, Arlington, Belmont, all of those have the community preservation, and Lincoln, Lexington, of course, and most of those have 3%, as opposed to our 1.5%.
Okay. So how are the proceeds divided in Wayland? I mean, there's historic preservation, open space, community housing, recreation. How do you divide it up?
So historic preservation, open space, and community housing each get 10%. Then the rest goes into a general fund.
Okay.
And those can go to recreation and other projects. The money that comes from the state comes from a community preservation trust fund that Gretchen was just describing.
Oh, I see.
And that is about 15% of the total funds that we get each year. So we have about $1 million each year, or recently. So Gretchen can clarify. And so about 15%, or 150,000, came from the state fund. And so that's what happens each year. The state money and the town money gets thrown into a common pot and then divided that way.
Okay. And
May I just say
sorry,
one thing about
Gretchen,
that? No, it's interesting to note that when the Community Preservation Act began, in the very beginning, because we were one of the first towns on board, we were getting about 80% of our total.
that,
So it
yeah.
was, they look at what you've raised and then match it up to whatever the percentage is. At that time, it was 80%. Now, as Susan said, it's down to, and
50.
last year or 2 years ago, it was 11, and now it's come back up to 15, and I think that there's a move for more.
well, that would be nice. So how much do you have currently in the kitty?
So at the moment, there's between 900 and $1 million. Well, that's what's collected each year.
Okay.
And the actual, I'd prefer to tell you after town meeting, is that fair? Or before town meeting?
you wanna-
Before town meeting. We have about 1.5 million.
Okay.
In the uncommitted funds.
Okay.
Then the other funds are
Mhm.
there and have X number of dollars in them.
Okay. All right. So how do projects get to town meeting?
So what happens is that various people in town, often coming from committees in town, so
Mhm.
Conservation Committee, Recreation Committee,
Mhm.
they'll approach the Community Preservation Committee. And as Gretchen has mentioned, they often come to her first, just to make certain that their projects will clear the criteria for
Mhm.
a community preservation
Mhm.
project.
Mhm.
So they'll come through our committee and we'll review them, and assuming that they meet the criteria, then we approve them. And
Mhm.
then they get sent to an annual town meeting,
Mhm.
generally annual and not the spring town
Not
meeting.
special town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. And what percentage of your projects have been approved to date?
Well, in terms of the projects that make it to town meeting,
Mhm.
100% have been approved.
Right. Great. I remember I was sitting across from you when the Mainstone Farm got approved, and you and I were both so happy. That was a wonderful, wonderful thing. Okay, so that brings me to next, which is, I've answered part of it. What have been some of your major projects to date?
Well, obviously, Mainstone Farm.
How much did we pay for that again?
15 million total,
15.
but 12 million from the town,
Uh-huh.
CPC,
Mhm.
and then the 3 million that was raised by Sudbury Valley trustees.
Right, okay, so 15 in
So
total,
that's
yeah.
right.
Mhm.
So that was definitely the biggest. In fact, it was
Mhm.
featured, it is featured, I think, on the Community Preservation Coalition, the statewide
Mhm, mhm,
coalition of
mhm.
preservation commissions, committees on their website as one of the big projects
Mhm.
that has
Yeah.
occurred. In terms of other, the other disciplines,
Mhm.
I would say that the Nike site housing
Mhm.
we didn't, I think we put in about 600 and then maybe another 400, maybe close to $1 million.
Mhm.
And that was to get the cost to the right place for the property owner, or the
Oh.
person that was going to buy it.
Mhm.
They needed that extra
I
money
see.
to boost it. So
Mhm.
that was a great project because we wanted to do
Mhm.
housing there.
Mhm.
And then a couple $100,000 went toward the open space there.
Okay.
But it was,
Mhm.
I think, a charge to recreation. So
Okay.
each project, when it goes to town meeting, has to be charged to one of the
I
4
see.
disciplines.
Mhm. Mhm.
In terms of historic preservation,
Right.
the biggest project is Stone's Bridge.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will say, oh, what are you going to do about it? Because
Mhm.
you haven't done anything yet.
Mhm.
And you've had this money for a long time.
Mhm.
It's been a huge permitting process.
I see.
Because the Army Corps of Engineers is involved. The river has to be rerouted.
Oh, gosh.
It has to be done at low water.
Mhm.
And we had always wanted to do 2 arches to see how it went,
Mhm.
and then come back and do the other 2 arches.
Mhm. Mhm.
But we're sort of rethinking that, maybe having to do the whole thing at once.
Oh, I see. It's a beautiful bridge.
Yeah, no, it's great, and it is listed on the National Register now.
Ah,
So-
good. Mhm. Okay. All right. Well, let's turn to the articles that you're bringing to this year's annual town meeting. So the first is Article 8, set-asides and transfers. And this seems to be a housekeeping administrative matter, but would you just briefly explain it?
It is. It's,
Mhm.
every year we're required by law
Mhm.
to take 10% of the annual proceeds,
Mhm.
which is the fee on the tax, the 1.5%, plus the state trust fund.
Mhm.
So you figure out what that is, and then 10% goes into historic preservation, 10%
Mhm.
to open space, 10% into community housing.
Mhm.
And then also at that same time, we have to set aside the money for the debt service for Mainstone Farm. Because
Okay.
we paid part of it out of
Uh-huh.
cash, and then we borrowed another half of it.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
this year it's $371,000 and X dollars.
Mhm.
So that is set aside so that they can pay that twice a
Okay.
year when
Mhm.
that comes up. And yeah, that's about,
That's
that's
what
the
it
set aside,
is.
yes.
Okay. So, jumping way ahead to Article 14, partial funding for the construction of Part 2 of the Wayland High School Master Athletic Plan. Can you tell us about that?
Sure.
Susan, yeah.
So the recreation department came to us, and actually the school committee came to us, I think it was, and they requested, I think, a 1.5 million, really to 1.9 million, to really to cover a lot of it. But we are not in the position to give that amount of money. We don't have that in the budget, and we also can't cover turf fields. So the part that we are able to help fund for recreation purposes is the redoing the tennis courts and the softball field and the basketball court and parking area. And essentially, those items are going to flip. So now they're going to be tennis courts, assuming this passes. The tennis courts will be in the front of the high school, so there'll be more public access.
Okay, yes. Right.
And then in the back of the high school will be the softball field. And I think the basketball court's going back there too. That I'm not 100% sure about.
Okay. Well, when I read your website, it says that CPA funds are to be used for the purchase of land for recreational purposes, and this article doesn't involve the purchase of land, so how can it be justified?
So there are actually 3 areas that the CPA covers, and one is purchase. The other are the creation or the preservation of recreation lands.
Okay.
So it would fall under
It
those.
would fall into that. Okay.
It's an or, not and.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure,
Yeah.
keeping you legal.
That's
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
This is legal.
Yep.
I like it.
Okay. So Article 17 is to rehabilitate trailheads and construct limited parking at local conservation and recreation area. Can you explain why the trailheads need work and what kind of enhancements are planned? And why is more parking needed? And is this connected with the turf field project, and if so, how?
So I'll start backwards.
Okay.
This was connected to the turf field project. It was a set of enhancements to the local field area to improve signage and help people find their way around that conservation area, which is a resource for the community. With that, I don't know if you've been over there, the parking is in terrible shape.
Okay.
So it's not ADA, American with Disability Act compliant. So it would need to be upgraded for that reason. So when the petitioner came in front of us, we said, well, if the turf field passes, then we can understand how this would be a comprehensive package. But if the turf field does not pass at town meeting, do you still want to go ahead with this? And they said they did. So we authorized it, and we cut back on the parking so that it's going to be up to $103,000 for a smaller parking area and $15,000 for the trailhead enhancements.
And what is the problem with the trailhead? Why does it need to be enhanced?
I'm not entirely sure, actually. I don't know if you remember, Gretchen, what the whole thing is.
It was definitely signage.
Oh,
There's no
I see.
sign there to lead your way
Oh, I see.
to the trailhead. So it's definitely
Uh-huh.
getting from the parking lot onto the trail.
And
Okay.
also just getting around the trails. I mean, I don't know if you've been up in that area.
I
get
don't.
lost every time
Oh,
I
do
go
you?
there. Yeah.
Yeah, oh no, that's no fun to get lost. I only go to places I know where I
Yeah.
find my way around.
But the $15,000 will just cover the area at the parking lot. You know, getting onto the trail. It's not.
Okay.
It can't change the whole. Trail.
Okay, all right. And so Article 18 is to include construction of a boat ramp at Dudley Pond,
Right.
an outdoor classroom and pollinator garden. Could you tell us about each of those things?
Sure.
I'm fascinated by the pollinator garden, frankly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start with that then. A pollinator garden it's for native plants. So I would imagine, since this is a Conservation Commission article or request, they're interested in showcasing plants from Middlesex County. And I don't know if you've heard of like a butterfly bush, but
Yes.
a butterfly bush is a pollinator plant
Okay.
because a butterfly is a pollinator, as are
Okay.
other insects.
Okay.
So it's a way to demonstrate local plants that can be used to encourage, local insects to, populate the area.
I see. All right.
And so it's a way to teach community members and including children about that.
Oh, okay.
And then in terms of the Dudley Pond boat ramp, that is a boat ramp that is proposed to be installed sort of at the end of the chateau's parking lot. So there's no.
Oh, I know where that. Yeah, it's kind of messy down there. It's hard to get a
Yes.
boat in there.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's really,
Town land.
it's town land, right, thank
okay.
you for clarifying that. There's no parking associated with it.
Right.
So it's town land that is available for safety reasons. If the fire department needs to get into the pond for any reason, they would have access. Similarly, it would be used if there's weeding that needs to be done in Dudley Pond. They've had these very large weeding machines
Yeah.
that are really hard to get into the pond in its prior access area, which was Mansion Beach.
Yes, I know that.
And then the other thing is for the residents who have pontoon boats, they would launch through there.
Okay.
But they're only able to launch outside of March 15th to November 15th. So they would already have had to launch.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
And the boats stay in. It's
The
not
boats stay
daily,
in,
can't
yeah.
come for the day.
Yeah, yeah.
that's right.
And the outdoor teaching
So that,
classroom?
Do you want me to
That's-
talk about that a little bit? Because I did talk to
Sure.
the conservation. I forgot
Yeah.
to tell Susan that
Yeah.
I did talk to someone in
Yeah.
conservation today. They have been, large stones have been donated to make an outdoor classroom.
Oh, that's nice.
And it's going to be on the island in the parking lot, right near there. And they're thinking, it would hold maybe 10 to 20 people.
Yeah, yeah.
And they would have little stools made out of tree trunks,
Right.
slices. And then in terms of the pollinator garden, which Susan, those are going to be raised beds around the edge of the classroom. And for people's reference, the garden club planted a pollinator garden just west of the depot last year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And it's really nice, and it's getting going.
Oh,
It's not there
good.
yet.
Well, I'll drop by. We were just down there today. Yeah. Okay. So now you have the historic preservation, the fence at First Parish, the arch window at Cochituate Village apartment, and you talked about Stones Bridge, but we always like to hear more about that beautiful place. So what is the need at the First Parish?
Well, the First Parish has in the past maintained the fence that we see along
I
Route
know.
20 and along Cochituate Road. In fact, most of the fence is in the public right-of-way
Right.
owned by the town
Yes,
and the
yes.
state. But they've very kindly taken care of it, and they've had parishioners that have taken care of it until 10 years ago when the intersection was redone.
Oh, yes.
Then everything was taken out and then relocated, but the rails are all split, falling off. Some of the hinges are falling off. The rails need to be painted, etc. So the First Parish came and said, we're still willing to help, but we don't have the finances for this. And we said, well, it's really town property,
Sure,
but
sure.
if you would manage it, it'd be great,
Yeah.
because it's just one more thing that the DPW is not in the position to do right now. It's just another project. That's,
Okay.
so they're going to, hopefully, if this passes, be able to manage it for us.
Oh,
It
that
just-
would be
Yeah,
good.
it's
Okay.
really nice.
And how about the Cochituate Village
So that
apartments?
is one window that needs to be, and it's right over the entrance from Shawmut Road,
Okay.
Shawmut Avenue. It's the main entrance to
Okay.
that people come and go,
Uh-huh.
not from Main Street. And that needs to be replaced for sure. But because historic preservation money is being used for anything, it has to be done according to the Secretary of Interior standards, and one of the things is materials, so it has to be in wood
Oh, I see.
and similar to what is there.
Similar to what's
Yes,
there.
right.
All right. So it really defines the building.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it is a character-defining feature, yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And
And then
Stones
Stones Bridge.
Stones Bridge.
Yeah, it's great. This is what I was referring to. that
Yes.
We found out that since the river has to be moved, we don't want to do that twice, because that's
Right.
the biggest expense. And so we're asking for another $300,000 to cover the full repair of Stones Bridge,
Okay.
because the other work hasn't been done yet,
Mhm.
and that it'll all be done next August
Okay.
and September
Okay.
if it's ended.
All right. And so lastly, we have Article 20, which is funding for a housing consultant. Why do we need a housing consultant, and what are the qualifications for that position?
Well, this is the selectmen's request, because the selectmen have certain responsibilities regarding housing,
Is this housing or affordable housing?
affordable housing.
Okay,
Yes. And they obviously will, are communicating with the Housing Authority and the Housing Partnership and the Housing Trust. But there are certain parts of monitoring that are required of all housing units. And then there will be a fair amount of work regarding River's Edge when that comes online, that will require more than we have staff. We don't have a staff person in town because the Housing Authority is a federal agency, and they've got their hands full, and they can do some of this, and they can apply to do some of the work as well. But the selectmen need this extra money for them to be informed and to carry out their duties.
Okay, and so how many hours a week or month? Or
I don't know that I can really answer that.
Because that's a selectmen's project.
Yeah,
okay.
right. I don't.
Right.
I should have come prepared with the hours that they use. We funded this 2 years ago.
Okay.
And they've used all but 6,000, and they asked for 20,000 then 2 years ago.
Okay.
Took a while to get going, and it's been Regional Housing Planning Services that was doing it.
So if all of these articles are approved, what is the total dollar amount?
If the projects
The
are
five.
approved,
The 5 articles.
it's $962,500.
I think that,
dollars.
I think, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but there are also another almost $500,000 shifting, because some's going into the housing trust, the housing part, and then the debt service for Mesa.
Oh, right, of course.
So it's very close to 1.5 million.
Right. I think the town feels that, well, the money's, out of our pockets anyway, so we might as well, say yes.
Right.
It's great.
Well, and I think that's an important point,
Yeah.
That we haven't made, that you just brought up. That this money is already collected.
Right.
Already.
So we have nothing more to lose.
Right. Well, it's not. It's not
it isn't.
changing your tax bill.
No, and
it's done.
No, it's done, and it's not. To me, it's not a loss anyway, because the stuff that you do is just. I appreciate it really so much.
And there are things that people wouldn't do now without it.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
We just let it go by the wayside.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's a great thing. Well, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just encourage people to come to town meeting.
Yeah, voters, come to town meeting.
Right.
Vote these projects in. Okay, well, thank you very, very much,
Thank
Gretchen
you.
and
Thanks
Susan.
for the opportunity.
Hope to see you
Yeah.
again soon in the not-too-distant future. Good luck at town meeting.
Thank you.
That's the buzz for this week. Next week, we'll review the last articles being presented at April 29th annual town meeting. The subject will be the proposal created by a group of middle school students as part of a civics initiative to establish a committee for a Wayland Music Festival. Our guests will be the school superintendent Arthur Yanofsky and several of the middle school students. We will also be talking about the latest development at the Lokerfield story, the claim that a vernal pool just above and within 100 feet of the proposed parking area would be an environmental issue, along with threats to the resident tree frogs. Talking to that point will be John Sachs, a resident of the Willowbrook condominiums, who have been opposing the artificial turf field. Join us starting on April 28th. And remember, the Buzz airs on Sundays and Tuesdays at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. on your public cable TV station, Comcast Channel 8 and Verizon Channel 37. And we're online on demand anytime at our website, wacam.tv/buzz. There you'll find an archive of past programs and a schedule of upcoming shows, along with links to documents from subjects presented on the shows. And you'll find a transcript of this week's interview, along with our committee reports, every week in the Town Crier, both in print and online. If you have a town issue you'd like discussed on the Buzz, call us, email us, or use the contact form on our website. Tell us what's on your mind and what you think about the show. I'm your host, Ken Isaacson. On behalf of the entire volunteer crew and guests here at Wayland Weekly Buzz, thank you for watching, and please tell your friends to tune in too.
What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. 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 What should you want to know?